Hi everyone, my name's Sumitra Singam and I'm here to present to you as part of the Writers Workout Conference, Writing Trauma Without Traumatizing Yourself. So first of all, I'd like to really thank the Writers Workout team for inviting me to submit a video to the conference, which I think is such a great initiative. I also want to acknowledge to you that I come from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation here in Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. And I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. So I'm here today to talk to you about writing trauma without traumatizing yourself. So by way of background, I am a writer and I write primarily flash fiction and flash CNF. And you can find me on Blue Sky on my handle, which is at pleomorphic2. And in my regular life, I'm a psychiatrist and I work as a trauma therapist. And it really felt to me last year in 2024 that it was important to combine those two worlds. And so I've been running a Writing Trauma Without Traumatizing Yourself workshop, which I think people have found helpful. So I'm just synthesizing some of the information in potted form here. And if you are interested at all in attending one of my workshops, please just send me a DM via Blue Sky or send me an email, pleomorphic2@gmail.com. So just a brief summary of the topics that we'll be covering today. We're going to talk a little bit about trauma, what trauma actually is, and we're going to talk a bit about what happens in the body, both when there has been an experience of trauma, either a single event trauma or chronic and complex trauma across the lifespan, and how that intersects with writing. We're also going to be talking about polyvagal theory and the window of tolerance. And what's really good about that is that you can use that information to understand what's happened within your body after having a certain experience or after writing something. And using the knowledge that I'm going to give you today, you can hopefully then learn how to regulate back from whatever has happened, so that you can write your trauma, which is a really important thing to do. Because I feel that trauma is something that isn't a story yet, and the act of writing it out is very healing in and of itself. So you can write your trauma without feeling that kind of shell shock effect, so that you can regulate back from that. So that's my aim for today, and I hope that you find the presentation helpful. I'd be really interested to hear any feedback or suggestions you might have. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you again to the Writers Workout team for inviting me today. I would like to begin by asking you a question. Do you know you have a body? And what you might do is just pause the video to take a few moments to consider your answer to this question. Hold this in mind. And there might be something that comes up quite immediately for you, an immediate answer, and then there might be a different answer that comes up with some time for consideration. And what I would like for us to do together, if it feels okay to you, is to do some regulation together, just a moment of mindfulness. And you might be sitting at a desk, you might be on your couch, you might be on the floor, whatever position you're in, feeling free to pause the video for a minute and get yourself into as comfortable a position as feels right for you at this stage. So it could be that you spread out a yoga mat and you lie down on the floor. It could be that you have to get yourself a jumper or socks or blanket if the weather is cold, or conversely, put a fan on if the weather feels hot. So getting yourself into as comfortable a position as you can, and really prioritizing that, feeling that you have the right and the ability to make yourself comfortable. And as you come into a position of comfort, how does this feel to you to be sitting here with me, to be invited to come into the body? Does this feel comfortable and natural? Does it feel uncomfortable? And we're going to try to use the breath in this exercise. We're going to use the breath as a little thread. So respecting wherever your breath might be at this minute. Could be caught in the throat or high up in the chest. Wherever the breath might be, just allowing it to be where it is. Respecting that the body is wise and the body knows better than the mind does what it needs. Breathing in and breathing out. Even if the breath feels like it's caught in the nose, it's very nasal. Even if the breath feels like it's caught in the chest. Or your breath might feel quite deep, quite natural. However it feels, just allowing that to happen, breathing in and breathing out. And it might be that if you're lying on the ground, you place your right hand on your abdomen, your left hand on somewhere on your rib cage, just to notice what happens in the body as you breathe in and as you breathe out. And is it possible at all for you to just invite the breath in a little bit further, holding an image in your mind of the airways as if they are an inverted tree. So the mouth, the back of the nose, the back of the throat, the windpipe as the trunk of the tree. And then as the trachea branches into the right and left bronchus and the bronchioles, imagine them to be the branches of the tree. And the alveoli, the air-filled sacs, are the leaves of the tree, holding this image. And you're breathing in and breathing out. Every in-breath bringing fresh cleansing energy. Every out-breath is a chance to release any stale energy that's no longer serving. And in our modern lives, we like to hold on to things. Is it possible to just let go, just for now? As simply as breathing out. And the mind is busy, the mind is active. The mind might call your attention elsewhere. No sense of judgment about that, just gently unhooking and returning to the practice of breathing in, breathing out, holding that image of the inverted tree. Being with the body, just for now. Breathing in, breathing out. Just noticing now if the breath has changed in any way. And it might not have. Again, no sense of judgment about that. Breathing in and breathing out. And making this the last full mindful breath, releasing completely, allowing the breath to return to baseline. Feeling into the body in whatever position you might be in. You might be lying down, you might be sitting. Just feeling into the body, feeling into the whole body. And letting go of the awareness of the body now, inviting some gentle movement of fingers and toes. Maybe the body will need to stretch and yawn, just taking that. And if you're lying down, rolling over onto whichever side, staying there for a minute, allowing the blood pressure and heart rate to come back. And then coming back into a seated position or whatever position feels comfortable and returning to the presentation. And I would like to ask you that same question again. Do you really know you have a body? And do you know that to write you necessarily have to use your body? So what was your original answer to the question, do you know you have a body? And is that answer any different now, having had 5 minutes with me of grounding, regulating, coming back into the body? And what does that tell you about how you hold your body and mind as you go through your day? And of course, as we write, we have to use our body in a concrete sense, in the sense that we have to adopt a certain position, we have to hold a pen, or we have to type. But also in the less concrete sense, in the mirror neuron sense, in the sense that as we are writing about someone running, we are also in our mind having a sub-threshold experience of the motor neurons involved in the act of running, firing. And that is a process that actually happens within the body. I would like to just talk to you about the brain for a minute. You can see in this picture here, this is the spinal cord. So as we receive information through our sense organs, this information is conveyed from the spinal cord to this relay station here, the thalamus, that's colored green. The thalamus then sends the information to the amygdala, which is this almond-shaped thing here, and it asks, is this dangerous? And the amygdala has only two options. It can only say yes or no. If the answer is no, then the information goes on for further processing. It goes to the hippocampus, which is this seahorse-shaped thing here, and important things happen there. So a timestamp is attached onto it, and an emotional valence is attached onto it. It then goes further to the frontal lobe so that this experience can be integrated into your self-concept, into your view of others and your view of the world, and some meaning can be attached to it. If, however, the amygdala says this is dangerous, then there are some very limited responses. The first is you can stay and fight or flee, or you can freeze, or you can feign dead, or a modern human response is to fawn. You might have heard of all of these responses. Now I would like to talk to you about what trauma is. And Gabor Mate, who is a Canadian physician who I would highly recommend, he writes widely about the topic of trauma and has also released some videos and movies about this. He writes in a very approachable way, so I would highly recommend his books. What he says is that trauma is not what happens to you, it's what happens inside you as a result of what happens to you. It is not the blow on the head, but the concussion I get. And the reason that this is really important is because if trauma was the thing that happens to you, well, then it's happened and there's no recovering from it. But if we take trauma inwards as something that has happened within our mind-body complex, then it is actually possible to heal from it. And I think it's a very important message of hope that Gabor gives us. I will very briefly mention the ACEs study, which was a large population-based study that the CDC in America did in the 1990s. And basically, at that point, we thought trauma was this really rare thing that hardly happened to anybody. But what the ACEs study revealed is that traumatic experiences are widespread and have myriad effects. I would also like to point out the difference between a person who's had a pretty well ordinary, good enough development and upbringing and has one single traumatic event versus a person who experiences chronic and complex trauma that happens during their developmental years and across the lifespan, and how these two things are inherently different, and the latter actually has significant effects on the person throughout their mind-body complex and throughout their lifespan in the way that they live and work and relate to others. So I've come up with this graphic on what I believe trauma to be, and I believe trauma to be a chronic system overwhelm that actually never quite resolves. And this is the case for both single event post-traumatic stress disorder and chronic and complex post-traumatic stress disorder. But of course, if it happens at a younger developmental age, then that contributes to more overwhelm. If it also happens within a system, for example, for the child, that would be the family or the school system that is not particularly robust, that cannot meet the child where their needs are at, then the overwhelm will be even more. If the robustness of their support structures are also overwhelmed, or if the size and frequency of the noxious stimulus is large and frequent, then obviously the degree of overwhelm will be much higher as well. I would now like to talk to you about polyvagal theory and the window of tolerance. So this was first elaborated by a man called Stephen Porges, Porges, and you can look him up. He's written quite widely on the topic. I'm just going to give you a very kind of brief introduction to polyvagal theory and the window of tolerance, but there are many, many, many resources you can access. YouTube is a really good place to look. So what Stephen Porges says is that we all oscillate within an optimal arousal zone mediated by the vagus nerve. So you might have heard of the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is a nerve that, unlike other nerves in our body, originates in the brain. So it's called a cranial nerve. It starts in the back of the brain, goes down past the ear, down past the jaw, down through the throat, down past the heart and lungs, past the diaphragm and into the gut. So it's a very important nerve to provide information to the brain from the body and to provide instructions from the brain to the body. It's incredibly important. And the vagus nerve has got two sides. It's got a front side, the ventral side, and a back side, the dorsal side. So the front side, the ventral side, is what regulates this green zone. And so if you've had a good enough upbringing, ideally your green zone is quite wide. And ideally, the first thing that happens if you experience some kind of stress is that you use your neck muscles. You look around for help and you use your voice. You ask for help. And usually that might be enough to resolve the stress. But if that doesn't help to resolve the stress, then what we do is we go up into our sympathetic nervous system, into adrenaline, into fear, fight, or flight. Now, what's really important to point out is that if you have had developmental trauma, your green zone might be very narrow. It might, in the setting of very severe mental illness, like psychosis, like severe trauma, not exist or exist in a very fleeting way, so that people actually end up living up in hyperarousal. And when you are living in hyperarousal, what that looks like is that you're a person who can't stop. You're moving all the time, and it feels actually quite unsafe to you to stop. And so if you are here for an actual survival reason, then it's very helpful to have adrenaline because it allows you to stay and fight or run. But if you're up here because of chronic dysregulation from chronic and complex trauma, then that actually can end up with a lot of difficulties due to chronic cortisol and adrenaline, which is quite cytotoxic to the brain and can cause myriad effects on the body, like chronic fatigue, pain conditions, etc. Now, if being up here doesn't resolve the stress, then you might or might not go through freeze, which is a kind of a horrible in-between phase to be in. I'll come back to freeze. But what the next thing that can happen, mediated by the dorsal vagus, the back part of the vagus nerve, is that you go into hypoarousal or collapse. Basically, the idea behind that is if you are going to be eaten by the predator anyway, then it's probably helpful to have lost consciousness, to lose all your muscle tone, and to flood your body with endogenous opiates so that it doesn't hurt. And so what that looks like in human modern form is a person who sort of doesn't try, feels quite hopeless about things, might be very cynical, and might say things like, what's the point anyway? Why should I try? And this person might be quite numbed. And some of us who live up here might actually only know how to regulate by numbing ourselves, by bringing ourselves down here, by using numbing agents like alcohol, benzodiazepines, or other things that bring us down, or video games, etc. Now, coming back to freeze, what freeze actually is a horrible halfway point between being up here, where you've got your adrenaline, your heart rate going, your blood is pumping, your blood pressure's going, but also your muscles are starting to paralyze, starting to shut down. So that's the classic rabbit in the headlights sort of posture. Now, I would like you to just take a minute, if you can, to tune back into your body, maybe even place a hand on your chest and just see what it's felt like to listen to me talk about the window of tolerance. A lot of people who live with trauma find even talking about the window of tolerance quite difficult. I would like to acknowledge that. And if at any point you need to pause the video, take a moment to regulate, please do so. I would like now to talk to you about the effects of trauma on the window of tolerance. I covered that when we were on the graphic earlier, but I'll just leave this slide up and you can pause the video at any point to read through. And if there's anything on here, I know I'm going through very quickly because the presentation is only half an hour, but if there's anything in here that you feel you don't fully understand, I really welcome people emailing me to ask questions. Or, you might find other resources on the internet as well. I would like to talk to you now about hyperarousal. So just to remind you, hyperarousal is being up in adrenaline. Your heart rate's going, your blood pressure's going, you feel really hot, and your body has told you that there's a danger, so you want to stay and fight or you want to run. And I've got this reading here from a piece by Pat Foran in the Reckon Review in June 2024. I listened. Corey isn't breathing. Corey isn't breathing. Corey's mother screamed. Please hurry, she screamed. Hurry. I called back. I didn't wait. And I ran and I talked while I ran and I didn't wait. I hurried. And the car it ran and my brain it raced and my heart it hurried. It did. No, I said in the car. No, I said to the car. No, I said to myself. Not now, not yet, I said. And I think this is such a brilliant piece to evoke that sense of rush and the inability to think. I would like to give you an exercise. It's entirely optional, but it might be helpful to just illustrate how our body becomes affected as we're writing different states. So this riffs off the idea that as writers we actually use our body to write, so that if you're writing about someone in the state of hyperarousal, your body might also go into that state of hyperarousal. And if you are interested, you can use Pat's piece as a prompt. I'll put it up here. You can pause the video and you might take 5 minutes to just write whatever comes to you and unpause the video when you're done. And what we'll do is I'll teach you how to regulate back from being in hyperarousal. So to regulate from hyperarousal, basically the body has just been through an ordeal that is a bit like running a race. And so you do what runners do after a race. They exhale through pursed lips sometimes and they close the body. So again, we'll take about 5 minutes together and I will guide you through something. You're welcome to skip ahead if that doesn't feel right to you, or you're welcome to follow along with me. And everything that I say in these different regulation techniques, they're just suggestions. They're not commandments in any way at all. So in whatever position you might be in, you might lie down, you might decide to stay seated, you might find that actually that's intolerable and you'd prefer to curl up. Child's pose with your body folded over your bent knees is often a really regulating position when you've been in hyperarousal. So taking a full body breath in once you've got yourself comfortable. Breathing right in all the way from the soles of the feet, palms of the hands, up to the crown of the head. And releasing. And you might do that twice more. Last time. And allowing the breath to just come to baseline. Just noticing where the breath is. The breath might be caught in the throat, might be high up in the chest, wherever it is. And whatever position you're in, is it possible to even just gesture or imagine the body leaning forward slightly? So if you're sitting at a desk, you might even place your hands on the desk and rest your forehead on your hands. If you're lying down, you might roll over onto one side. And if you're sitting, you might stretch your legs out in front of you and curl over. Breathing in and breathing out. And paying some attention to the out-breath. Letting the in-breath just regulate by itself, paying attention to the out-breath. And what is the body trying to say to you? Finding that part of you that can listen, that can tune in, like you're searching for a radio station. Remembering that the body is wise, and the signals from the body are always really clear and sharp and concise. Breathing in and breathing out. You might place a hand in the center of your chest. You might place another hand on top of that. And as you tune into the heart space, you might say to yourself, I am safe. I am complete. I am at home in my body. And you might repeat that to yourself internally. And they might just be words, but as you breathe in, as you breathe out, the words might start to sink in and might start to make some sense to you, might start to carry some meaning. And you might even do something like remind yourself of today's date. Remind yourself of your age. Remind yourself of where you are, your surroundings. And remind yourself that you are not at risk at this present moment. That you are able to bring yourself back to regulation simply by breathing in and breathing out. Letting go now of the hands on the chest if you've placed them there. Letting go of the awareness of the breath. Allowing the breath to return to baseline. And if you have been leaning forward, coming back. And you might find that there is a need in the body to move, to stretch. Just taking that there is no requirement for stillness. Oftentimes people who have lived with chronic and complex trauma find stillness very difficult. Just not judging yourself for that. Your body is just trying to keep you safe. That's all it's doing. Taking a full big body breath in again, all the way from the soles of the feet, palms of the hands, up to the crown of the head. And releasing. And it might be good if you could take a few minutes to just reflect what that feels like now that we've regulated together. What did it feel like immediately after the writing exercise? How did that feel in the body? And how does it feel now? And we're going to move on now to hypoarousal. So just to remind you, hypoarousal is that bit down here mediated by the back part of the vagus nerve, the dorsal vagus, where the body starts shutting down. So you've flooded yourself with endogenous opiates. Your consciousness is starting to go. Your muscle tone is going. So I have a reading here for you from Lynn Mandel in Literary Namjuning, which I think really evokes that sense of collapse. I leave my waterproof watch next to my clothes on the deck because time has no place with me here. I leave my heavy boots, my phone, and all of the people in it and everything they say and do and ask, because as much as I love them, they are a weight too. I leave the holes left by the departed lest I drown in them. I leave my ears awash with nonsense. I leave today's news and tomorrow's. I leave my family, even my tiny vulnerable mother, because sometimes their need is an ocean I can't swim. And so I will invite you to do a similar exercise like the exercise we did earlier. And you might use Lynn's snippet, you might use something else as a prompt. And I'll invite you to pause the video here, take 5 minutes or even longer, and see what you write. And we will come back together and do some regulation from hypoarousal. So, when you are in hypoarousal, or your body has sort of gone into a state like that, it might help to pay some attention to what's actually happened in the body. And usually the body feels very shut down, the muscles feel very loose and floppy, and if you are someone who tends to slouch in their posture like I do, you might find that you've adopted that posture. And so basically, to regulate back from hypoarousal, what you want to do is do what everybody does when they've woken up. They want to take a big yawn and they want to stretch and open the body. And so I find the best way to regulate from hypoarousal is to do a little bit of movement. So I like to stand, but I'll let you do what feels right to you. And as I stand, I find myself swaying side to side. And the arms might go as well. Breathing in and breathing out. And I like to take big breaths. So once I've done a little bit of movement, what I might do is bring my hands into a prayer position at the chest. And as I breathe in, I push my hands out to the side. And as I breathe out, I bring my hands closer together. Breathing in. Breathing out. Breathing in. And breathing out. And now just take a moment to notice what that feels like after you've regulated from hypoarousal. I would just like to ask you all this question. Is this the right time to write it? And often in the setting of trauma, there's this sense that it has to be pushed through, it has to be written, it has to be spoken about. And I encounter that in the people who come to me for therapy as well. And actually, the body might be saying something quite different. The body is wise, and it often says these things for a good reason, which is that it's going to take you too far out of your window of tolerance to do that at this particular time. That doesn't mean there won't be a time in the future when it's right, but if you can use the window of tolerance as a point of reference and tune into your body using that language, often the right time will come up. So if even the thought of writing it takes you straight out of your window of tolerance, that probably isn't the right time. The best time is when you're in this yellow zone or this yellow zone. So not completely comfortable in the green zone, but not totally out of your window of tolerance either. I would like to thank you all so much for your attention, and again to the Writers Workout team for inviting me to present. I would love to hear from you. Any thoughts, comments, questions, please contact me via either Blue Sky or my email. Go well, stay safe, be well.